Welcome back, tech heads and gadget gurus, to another episode of Tech Times Daily, where, as always, we're going to dive into another interesting topic that has popped up on our radar over here at Tech Times. And this one, I feel, is the stuff that nightmares are made of. But with me, as always, is Christian. And how's it going, man? How you doing?
Good, good. As Buzz Lightyear would say, killer robots everywhere.
And we all know Buzz was from the future, right? So he knows. Uh, let me I've lost my damn thing. Okay. Yeah, so apparently Austria, of all places, is becoming increasingly concerned about what they deem uh killer robots, right? So we covered this at Tech Times, and John Lopez um actually took lead on this story. And he says, Australia sounds the alarm on AI weapon regulation amid concerns over killer robots. Um, Austria has recently raised the alarm on the urgent need for global action to regulate artificial intelligence and weapon systems amid growing concerns over the development of these so-called killer robots. Now, on Monday, Austria hosted a conference to revive discussions on this pressing issue. At the meeting, Austria discussed the ethical and legal challenges posed by the advancement of AI technology and warfare. So during the conference, we have a couple quotes here from Austrian Foreign Minister Alexander Schallenberg, maybe? Schallenberg. I don't know. I'm not, probably something completely different considering it's Austria. Um, but he said, we cannot let this moment pass without taking action. Now is the time to agree on international rules and norms to ensure human control. At least let us make sure that the most profound and far-reaching decision, who lives and who dies, remains in the hands of humans and not machines. And he made this statement at the conference, which they call Humanity at the Crossroads, Autonomous Weapon Systems and the Challenge of Regulation. Now, Christian, my question to you. So what ethical challenges are posed by weapon systems that could kill without human intervention?
Yeah, the earliest examples of this would be the drone strikes in Iraq, right? In Afghanistan.
Yeah, but they were still
Though
controlled
not,
by people.
yeah. In terms of AI assisted, I think major
Not
challenges
AI,
would
not AI assisted. I think AI controlled.
be AI controlled. Well, I guess the biggest challenge of it is actually discerning friendlies from actually enemies,
Mm,
right? Like the collateral damage for the previous campaigns have been really huge and really controversial,
mhm.
to say the least, and actually cause a bit of issues worldwide when it comes to refugees. So when it comes to ethics, it's not just regarding the killing; it's what's gonna be left in the wake of it. Like
Right.
if the AI could actually help make things more accurate for everyone, like in a sense, there's nothing ethical about killing at the end of the day.
True. Very,
But
very
if
good point.
it is for the greater good, it's the lesser of other evils. Yeah, I do agree that there should be ways regarding how they could actually make it less affecting the lives of the majority of the innocents.
Mhm.
So it needs to be looked into. But the thing is, with when it comes to the military, sometimes they dive in head first before actually thinking due to the urgency of the job. That's another thing.
Right. Now, do you think this is getting propelled because there are two wars on two different fronts that are using technology? We recently covered a story about Ukrainian pilots using outdated aircraft with modern weapon systems and actually using an iPad to launch these weapons.
The funny thing is about this, like, there is that possibility that using this technology can actually hasten the ending of a war,
Hmm.
right? And no one wants to prolong anything regarding this. The only war that I think actually went on for 365 days was that between I think Poland and the Isle of Scilly, which was the name sounds dumb because the war is pretty silly because no one actually realized they were still at war for 365 years. They just haven't signed a treaty to end it.
Oh well, it's not like North and South Korea,
Yeah,
but
so
not that many years though,
both
obviously.
parties actually forgot they were at war, and no one actually died with that war. So I think that's one of the fortunate cases where nothing actually happened. But in terms of it being able to help quicken the duration of the war and cause less loss of lives, I think it should be looked into.
Well, that's a good point. And it
There
makes
was
me
a case
think,
before, and you've experienced this because you were in Iraq before, right?
hmm, yeah,
That the case was if we finally got Bin Laden out of the way, things would actually be better
yeah, but
once he got.
yes, but that's a multifaceted. Like once he entered martyrdom, it was game over, really.
Yeah, so there is still a question mark on whether this could actually help end wars.
Right. Well, I mean, I would assume, um, let's look at it from the perspective of the opposition, right? Let's say, all right, let's say you and I are at war, right? Rather than use real life examples. Let's say you and I are at war, and I just learned that you have AI that is just lighting, like you've turned it over to AI, right? Now, my initial thought on this would be, damn, AI is a little bit more scary than just Christian. You know what I'm saying? Like it kind of eliminates like maybe a human error where you sneeze before firing, or you're exhausted from lack of sleep, or you're hungry, or you just got a letter your wife's cheating. Like there's a lot of things that are going to be erased. Like AI is just going to be focused. That, to someone on the business end, I feel would be terrifying.
We would also have to consider something. What's stopping my country from actually selling you the technology from your end?
I mean, it's yeah. I mean, this is Star Wars level.
That's why I said it could either hasten a war, or actually just prolong it, because sooner or later everyone will be getting this technology. As long as,
Well,
in the case of weaponry, it's still a business.
well, hopefully. I don't know if I should say hopefully. Uh, I don't know the right word to use. Not hopefully, but maybe one day war evolves to where human lives are not at risk. Like infrastructure, right? Like you would be like, shit, don't. It would almost be like a video game. Like, don't destroy my capital. All the people are going to be safe, right? We have ways to if you're not on the front lines or actively engaged, then you're probably going to be safe. Then you just have
Would a,
robots fighting
would
on
the
your
US
behalf.
be willing to actually donate a bunch of Xboxes and PS5s to Ukraine and Russia so they could suddenly duke it out on either Halo or Call of Duty?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
just decide and best out of 5 sets. Like,
Right. Yeah. It's like, okay, wait. Yeah, it'll be very much like, oh, you sunk my battleship. Like, it's getting serious. Like you've taken out. Of course, there'll always be human casualties in war, or there would be no war, right? Like that's kind of the point. Is like, I will kill you or all your friends. You know what I'm saying? Like that's kind of the point of war, or like at least that's the aspect of war that is the most effective.
yeah, with the example that you gave me between the two of us being at war, like, I can understand that is someone with a much higher firepower than the other one would actually cause the one with the lesser firepower to actually cower. But in the sense, The one with the lesser power would be driven by envy and want to actually attain that type of power through any means necessary to actually
Right,
keep the playing field even for both parties.
right, right,
Like
right.
there's also the factor of testosterone here. Like this is me getting a much higher degree of power just causes you to act out even more because that would be in a sense for you just a dare.
Yeah, that's when, yeah, you're right. And honestly, um, you know, I, I would go as far as to say a lot of, maybe at least half of the wars that are happening now are ego driven.
Yeah. Yeah,
Putin
just
probably is
basically
like, this
measuring
shit is mine.
competitions.
All right. But so what, because there are reports, right, that like the US said, that they're looking into media reports that the Israeli military has been using
Yeah.
AI to help identify bombing targets in Gaza. We talked about Ukraine with it's not really AI, but it is a technological first, right? Like you're flying a piece of shit from the Cold War, but you're launching, missiles, that were newly released on Amazon or whatever with an iPad. Uh, but like what ethical considerations, right? Let's again let's step into another role where you and I are um, weapons developers, right?
Yeah.
AI based type stuff. So, what considerations do you think we should make or take into account, basically, um, when developing, AI for military use? Like, should it be like iRobot, where like it can't hurt people?
And who are these AI driven robots going to be fighting against?
Well, no, I mean just like they wouldn't necessarily be. It's like using AI, implementing AI in military operations, right? So like logistically or um,
I can understand it for reconnaissance, like that part
recon.
I can get for recon as well as for logistics. Driving tanks is another thing. Anti-minefield
Yeah,
uh trucks could actually be operated by AI, no longer risking any life, right? So these
right.
are
So
the
it would be
implementations
more
of the AI would that I would most likely be looking at. At the end of the day, human judgment still needs to be present because there are nuances when it comes to war.
right,
Like a certain someone that's supposedly gonna be a POW suddenly gets capped so by an AI
right,
just because he's not a friendly. But if it's a human, he could probably discern that I could get some information from this guy because he looks like he knows someone from the higher ups.
right.
There are certain nuances when it comes to the human factor that can't be actually replaced by AI. That's a difference.
Discerning, yeah, like discerning, like is this person actually? That brings me to a point where, in the military, right? Well, the disadvantage that the West has, um, or that at least that we had, um, in the Middle East was following the Geneva Convention,
Yeah.
right? So the Geneva Convention, one part of the Geneva Convention says, once a once someone on the battlefield becomes a non-combatant, right? Let's say he runs at you with an AK-47, you manage to tactically remove one of his arms, right, with your weapon, right? His arm is gone. He can no longer shoot you. So he is no longer a combatant. Now, under the Geneva Convention, you are required by international law to give this man CPR, or to give this man first aid and save his life if you can.
Then we do have to also consider who we're fighting against. If I'm going to be taking into consideration the previous war in Iraq, these insurgents, even if you cut off their arm, they turn themselves into bombs.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like AI cannot discern this, right? Like
Yeah.
once it's a scary thing to think about. Like you picture this red target that hits something,
And
and then AI's like kill, and then there's nothing that humans can do at that point.
and I will never think of myself as someone that can understand why they do this because it's part of their religion. But it is
Hmm.
what it is. So
Yeah,
if an AI could actually consider whether something is actually going to be a threat,
right.
like not having limbs, supposedly you're not a threat anymore, but these people actually find ways
Well, I'm talking about in the moment. Like this is on the
in the
battlefield.
moment.
You have
Yeah.
to, you have, well, he can't like immediately, like he's struggling, right? He's got blood like shooting out. So maybe once he gets better, he does become
Then
combustible.
we're also going to have to think of the cost because when it comes to using these machines, the majority of those that are in war usually want to preserve them because not everyone has unlimited resources when fighting these wars,
True.
right?
Very, very true. Yeah.
So there is a cost that comes with it.
Yeah. And that's why you see a lot of repurposed stuff back to the Ukraine, the old planes and the new missiles.
Yeah.
Like they just don't have, um, yeah, they just don't have the means.
Like if these actually become available, I think that it's gonna be heavily regulated, and especially with the technology being proprietary, it just should be within the country. But then again, you know what world we're living in. Nothing stays
Right.
in a one country anymore,
Oh no, absolutely not. Like even before we hear about it, it's already spread like wildfire.
right? There is a conversation to be had regarding how much sanctions can be utilized in lieu or in place of actual weaponry. But what does the sanction actually hurt? It's not necessarily those involved in the war, but those actually being hurt by the economy, right? During and
Right.
after it.
Right, right, right. Well,
So
do you think there's a possibility that AI controlled killing machines end up being regulated the same as chemical warfare, where we're not allowed to use chemicals, like that you just can't. Like, don't do it.
in terms of it being weapons, like I'm not American. What's your understanding on how the U.S. actually regulate their weaponry?
Well, I mean, I know we don't use chemical weapons. That's in because it, just the 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 I don't even know how to call it, but like the shit gets in the water. You know what I'm saying? The shit gets in the ground. The shit blows in the air, and like
Yeah,
people 3 miles down the road are affected. Are affected. So
the
chemical
effect rate is
warfare
actually
is the double tap not allowed. You can't make sure someone's dead. Um, Now, mind you, whether or not these things are followed is a different conversation, but this is the regulations. These are on paper told to you. Um, so I mean, we regulate, and that, like you don't use, you know, you don't use excessive force. Actually, there's a lot of fucking rules, man, that we follow. And then I said earlier about the disadvantage. We follow these rules at that time. Um, the opposition in the desert didn't really have any rules. Like they'll put a bomb in a 6-year-old's backpack and walk her through a checkpoint. That's just how they get down. Um, but for us, more, yeah, civilized, definitely more civilized. Even though we're at war, you still have to treat people humanely. Um, I actually could see 100% AI powered weaponry becoming absolutely not allowed, and I wouldn't disagree with it at all.
the
Because
only
I
use
agree
for
with
AI that I can actually see is actually a weapon actually recognizes its owner and can't be used by anyone other than him.
right.
So that's one way to actually use it. The earliest
Yeah,
examples we have, like I said, was actually the AI assisted drone strikes, but those are still piloted remotely by humans.
yeah. That's the thing. This the conversation here is no human intervention. What it You set a parameter or a goal, like no one enters this area, and it just does it.
My
very
question to you is,
undiscerning.
if it's fully AI driven, like no human intervention, does does the killing does it make the killing any less unethical,
Yeah, I think it makes it
more
way
humane?
more. Well, I think it makes it way more unethical
Hmm.
because part, and this again, this is a personal belief, right? Like when, and I'm not saying I've done this or anything. Like I don't. Obviously, no one wants to kill anyone, but that aspect of you having that on your conscience or weighing on your heart, or it becomes, I mean, if you're not an absolutely cold-hearted person, these things will weigh on you, and they do. You see a lot of service members that have issues now because of this one thing where they had to take someone's life. Now, if it's a robot and no one is taking responsibility, then that feeling of like, oh, I've done something terrible, or I've gone against my religion, or whatever the case may be, that flies out the window.
Yeah,
Now there's no one has any, like, I didn't do it. 17,000 insurgents were killed today by an AI robot. It's like, oh well,
I
nobody's
just
responsible. The AI did it.
I just hope in the near future we don't suddenly report the news that James Cameron is actually assisting the Pentagon in developing these things. Like, please don't.
Some Transformers, if like Optimus Prime jump out there, and it's just
At least
game
those
on.
can actually, at least those can actually think. Like,
See, that's another thing. Like maybe this early iteration of AI is completely unacceptable for such a task, right? For such, but future versions,
we went from lovable Optimus Prime to Murder Prime in the movies. Like,
yeah. And there are like instances, right, where AI, it's not perfect right now. It's not. There's from the smallest things where like AI can, it doesn't know the difference between a referee's bald head and a football, or the autonomous driving cars that run people over because they don't recognize jaywalking because it's not in the system. It's illegal. It's not supposed. It's like a, what do you call that thing, in like a virus or something, right? It's like a bug. It's not supposed to be there, and it doesn't know how to react.
yeah, and AI would probably think of US AI would think that those are children. Asian AI would think those are factory workers.
Right. But I think the bottom line here basically is, do you think that it's up to
Of all
coalitions like the UN or Geneva Convention to take control of this thing now before,
of all
because
the
if,
countries that actually want to talk about war and ethics, it's Austria, right?
yeah, I don't even know what they got going on over there, to be honest with you. I honestly, for the first 15 minutes that I was doing the research on it, I thought it was Australia.
Yeah, Australians are friendly people
Well,
until
they are, yeah, I'm not
they
saying.
decide not to be.
But when I see that group of letters, my mind doesn't go to Australia or to Austria.
And even the start of their country wasn't actually that nice.
I seen something online. I don't know if it's true or not, and maybe you've seen it too. But it says, like, think you're having a bad day. There's a whole desk at the Austrian airport for people that flew there on accident, thinking they were going to Australia. It's like, wait, what? This is, oh no. I would because I mean, like I said, when you see that grouping of letters, you don't immediately think Austria. Unless somebody says Schwarzenegger, I'm not thinking about
That's
Austria.
that's a huge margin of error when it comes to the
Bro.
group of characters. Like,
Yeah. You imagine Europe, and it's like, oh, this flight is cheap as shit. It's like, yeah, because you're going down the street. You're not going halfway around the world. But yeah, yeah.
The joys of being
But,
a modern man.
but yeah. But alrighty, well, that wraps it up. Excuse me, yeah. That wraps up today's episode of Tech Times Daily. And again, tune in tomorrow for more cutting edge updates, discussions, our personal opinion. And until then, stay curious, stay connected. And from Christian to Hatteras, I'm Chris Short. See you next time.